Hi everyone, it's William here with the Grand Duke Dmitri YouTube series. We are in 1910. We've been going through a letter that Dmitri wrote to his sister in August of 1910, and we are up to part 4 or 5. Long letter. We're nearing the end. I almost am sad to say that because this is such an interesting letter. Okay, so what did we have last time? Our recap. Dmitri ended that paragraph by saying, what did he say? When I first got here, I very nearly shot myself. Dramatic language there. Not serious, but he's telling his sister how absolutely boring it is in Bavaria, Tegernsee, with his father and stepmother. They're there on a holiday. They insisted that he come and join them. He's 18 years old, and so he said when he first got there, yeah, he was just dying of boredom. Now he is still experiencing boredom and resentment as he has to sit and listen to his father read out loud every evening. But, he's gotten used to it. So that is what he told her, that when you're living with Papa, you're living by the clock. Everything is very organized. You eat, get up, take your walks, all at certain set times during the day, and then there are these, the torment of having to sit there, not just Dmitri, but the entire household, and listen to Paul read out loud every evening. So that's where we ended, and we'll just do one paragraph today, because I want to do the ensuing paragraphs separately. They're so great. This is a great paragraph too. But anyway, Dmitri ended the previous paragraph with complaints about the reading, and now we jump back in. On top of all that, Papa is in an extremely benign state of mind, but Ramali, and completely under the Countess's thumb. The latter is trying to slim down so she can look younger than she is. So I'll restate that. The latter is trying to slim down so she can look younger than she is in the upcoming season. She exercises like crazy, then feels poorly and falls into a foul mood. In the evening, she wears a robe and takes off all her fake hair. Then she looks like an old woman of 95. It's true! Exclamation point. GM has a cold and is a little bit depressed. He wants to be pitied and sulks. He wants to be pitied and sulks if you don't act worried about his health. Yefimovitch is bored out of his mind. He hardly says a word, just sitting there with his mouth shut. And when he does decide to speak, it's only to say something rude to the Countess or tell me about some pretty American girl or other. He's fallen in love with them all. Okay, so this is, we have to take it with a grain of salt, not that it isn't accurate, but Dmitri is also, with his wry sense of humor, he's also writing this to amuse his sister, so that's also something to keep in mind. So here's the report on Papa that he's sending to Maria. Well, the good side of it is that he is not irritable, and maybe he sometimes was. I mean, he had poor health, so it wouldn't be surprised if, Maria and Dmitri had seen him sometimes when they visited him in a state of irritability. So it's nice that that's not the case, but he is Crispin. He is muddle-headed, Ramali, muddle-headed, and he is passive in relation to his wife. He is just sort of letting her I guess, be the active person, because he certainly is not active. He's very much in charge of the household in terms of saying to his son and to the retainers, this is what we do at such and such time. But apparently, Olga, Countess Hohenfelsen, is the more sort of active element in the household. And yeah, there's a little bit of resentment there, always on the part, well, not after the revolution, but on the part of Dmitri and Maria in relation to their stepmother, that she has Paul, she leads him around by the nose. She took him away from them. And yeah, I mean, that, as the years go by, that very much diminishes. It's quite pronounced in 1906 in Dmitri's diary entries. By 1910, yeah, not so much, but, you know, they still believe that their father is, as he says, under her thumb. Maybe he liked being under her thumb. You know, I have friends who, you know, when you're out together, just the guys, they complain about their wives, bossiness, but, you know, you just get the impression that that's what they want. That's what they wanted when they looked for a wife. That's what they want now, and the complaining about it is just part of the game that we all play. So I don't know. I'm going too far afield in my comments here. So Olga is trying to lose weight. Some things never change, right? You know, you hit middle age, you want to lose weight, you want to look good, especially for the upcoming season. What is the upcoming season? I'm not sure. I guess the season in France, they'd be going back to France, but would that be the winter season? I mean, in England they have a summer season. In Davos, they have the winter season, is the season with a capital T and S. I don't know about France, but I doubt it was an autumn season. I would guess then that it was probably a winter season that she was getting ready for. Paul didn't have to worry about that because he was, his whole life, he was very slender. He had stomach trouble and he was tall and thin. But she was working hard to lose some weight, exercising like crazy, Dmitri says, but she wears herself out, and then she is in a foul mood, he says. So, okay, yeah. Seem like very normal observations in a household with middle-aged parents and a teenage boy. She is not standing on ceremony because the Grand Duke Dmitri Pavlovich is staying with them. She is putting on her bathrobe and taking off her wig or her hair extensions or whatever it was that she wore when she just wanted to relax in the evening. And maybe that wasn't the case in other households that he lived in. Maybe Ella did not, take off her gown and put on a dressing gown in the evening. Maybe Sergei didn't take off his corset. Maybe, as long as there were people around and they weren't in their own bedrooms, they kept up appearances. And so Dmitri is maybe a little taken aback by that. And yeah, I don't know. I know from my friend Ed, Dmitri's biographer, that Dmitri got very angry at one point. I don't know that he got angry on the spot and said anything, but later on he expressed anger that his father had introduced him to someone as my eldest son, my oldest boy, something like that, when he thought it should have been more formal. He wasn't just one of the kids, he was the Grand Duke Dmitri, right? So maybe he's a little taken aback about that with his stepmother, maybe not so much in relation to what he thinks he deserves as to what he's been used to in other households, when he was with Nicholas and Alexandra? I don't know. I'm sure some of you can tell me. It's been a long time since I've read any of their writings. Did they relax in the evening? Would Alexandra have put on a bathrobe and, put her feet up? I don't know. Okay, anyway, this I love this sentence. He follows that up by saying, "It's true!" exclamation point. She looks like an old woman of 95, and then he follows that nasty statement up by saying, "It's true." And that makes me laugh because my grandmother used to do exactly the same thing. She would make snide remarks about people behind their back, and then when somebody said, "Well, Grandma," or "Well, Mom, that's not nice," she would always answer that by saying, "It's true." So, one thing Dmitri has in common with my late beloved grandmother. Okay, now, GM Georgy Mikhailovich Laming had been with Dmitri from the time Dmitri was 10 years old as the guardian, not the guardian, but the word in Russian is vaspitatel, and there's not really a good translation of it. It's like a male governess, right? But saying governor doesn't sound, we don't use the word governor in that sense in English, but you get the idea. GM has been with Dmitri for 8 years now, and has been largely in, how do they say it, in loco parentis. Is that right? I shouldn't try Latin phrases. The father figure, who's there on a daily basis saying, "Okay, you're getting a haircut today," not the the father figure in the sense of Sergei or Nicholas. Who is not taking care of the day-to-day details. But GM is sulking. He has a cold, and another middle-aged person, he expects everyone to feel sorry for him and to be worried about him. He expects Dmitri to feel sorry about him and worry about him. He's not, generally speaking, I wouldn't say, judging from compared to Maria's governess, I wouldn't say that GM was a high maintenance person. But both with GM and with this Yefimovich, who was clearly another sort of retainer, you get the impression that, they're not just sort of people who are always deferential and respectful. Dmitri says Yefimovich is the only time he opens his mouth is to say something rude to Olga, to the lady of the house. So that's interesting, isn't it? And that's the impression that I get. That's the impression that I get from the 1906, 1907 diaries when Dmitri talks about Georgy Mikhailovich and Miss June, as he and Maria called this woman, this governess. And also when I translated the memoirs of Admiral Fabritsky, Semyon Semyonich Fabritsky, and I was so surprised the first time I read this about this incident where Alexandra, when they were on the royal yacht, Alexandra went to Fabritsky, who I believe was the first officer at that time, maybe the captain, and said to him, "Look, I have this manservant," and it wasn't even somebody like, GM. It was a male attendant of the, not a gentleman, and he wanted one of the staterooms, not servants' quarters, but one of the staterooms on the yacht, and Fabritsky said absolutely not. But then Alexandra personally went to Fabritsky and said, "Look, I'm begging you to do this, because if you don't, this servant is going to make my life miserable and ruin the entire trip for me. I know it's wrong for me to ask. I know it's, ludicrous, but he will make my life hell if you don't do this. And so, of course, she was the empress. Of course, Fabritsky said, yeah, here's your stateroom, Mr. Servant who's in a snit. So, the impression that I get, I'm not a royalty expert. I'm a Dmitri expert. I'm a Russian history expert. I'm not a royalty expert. So maybe some of you could comment and tell me, if my impression is correct, that, servants could sometimes be bullies within the household. Gentlemen and lady members of these households could be demanding people. They could be sulky. They could, expect to be, made a fuss over when they were sick, or that sort of thing. That, at any rate, is Dmitri's impression of what was going on. And the thing about that is that Dmitri was a very keen observer, and one who adapted, and who tried to be sort of, when there was a dispute, he tried to be the mediator, even when he was a child. And he was very attuned to people's moods. And it was important to him, if someone was in a bad mood, it was important to him to try to smooth things over. So my guess would be that he probably is, every day saying to GM, oh, how's your cold? I'm worried about you. Because he wants GM to be in a good mood. When people are in bad moods, it makes him anxious. So he probably was humoring GM, even though he thought the whole thing was silly. Now, Yefimovich, as I said, I don't know who he was. If you look at the picture that I used as a thumbnail yesterday, and it shows Paul and his household in Bavaria in 1904, so 6 years before this, and Yefimovich is in the photo. He's identified, and I can't remember, he's identified as a colonel. What was his first name? I knew it. But, so he was in the military, but when he left Russia to go and be an attendant, a member of Paul's household, perhaps he had been Paul's ADC, Paul's adjutant, but then went with him into exile when Paul was no longer wearing uniforms and no longer considered an officer in the Russian army. He'd been booted. So apparently Yefimovich was good enough to go along with him. Still undoubtedly receiving a salary, but, willing to give up also his military post and go into exile with Paul and Olga. And it sounds like he's kind of sulking too. Apparently he feels, he feels enough embedded in the household, he feels enough en famille that he can make these rude remarks to the lady of the house, and he can talk to the 18-year-old son about women. He's not, apparently Dmitri is the person that he's making comments about girls to, and not to Paul. And there are these American women, American girls, I guess. What does Dmitri say? No, he says girls. He doesn't say women. Some pretty American girl or other. So apparently there are American girls. And was 1910 still the Gilded Age? I think so. Where you had these women from these very wealthy American families, the Vanderbilts and so on and so forth. They were going to Europe. With their mothers are bringing them to Europe to look for husbands with titles, because these American millionaires were they wanted titles. They wanted to be respected. They wanted to be, old money and titles and noble status and that sort of thing. And of course, as we all know, Dmitri would end up marrying one of these American girls who was brought to Europe by her mother, in the hope that she would marry into a titled aristocratic or royal family. They were eager for that. But at the age of 18, oddly enough, Dmitri was not looking for well brought up young ladies. He was not looking for girls. He wanted experienced women, and his obsession was with Missy of Romania. I'm not sure if she was the queen or the crown princess of Romania at that point, but that's what he was looking for. He wasn't interested in, these prim, well-brought-up young ladies. Well, Yefimovich, on the other hand, I guess was. In the 1904 photo, you can look for yourself. It's the thumbnail for the previous video. He's a youngish man. I don't know. He probably wasn't middle-aged, but he's, very much interested in these young American women. He's in love with them, Dmitri says. Again, the caution is that Dmitri is trying to make his sister laugh with his observations. On the other hand, he was a very good observer for reasons that I've already mentioned, that he had this childhood where, he and Maria were sort of between households, moved around, and they learned to, at least Dmitri learned to pay very close attention to people. And, you could use that as a way to amuse your sister, but it was also a kind of survival strategy. Anyway, I've gone way too long. For a single paragraph, I've talked for over 20 minutes. I'm a bit ashamed of myself about that, but I'm enjoying this letter so much, so bear with me. And next time, we have just an absolutely marvelous and hilarious self-assessment. A self-assessment that Dmitri's self-assessment, and trying to make his sister laugh, undoubtedly succeeding, being serious and being harsh with himself, and at the same time, giving us real insight into how he likes to see himself. So, do come back for that. Now we're getting dark here, so it's definitely time for me to sign off. I hope to see you next time. Bye.